Joe, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Joe George. I'm currently the middle school counselor at WBIS in Israel. And this is my second year here. I spent 12 years before here as a school counselor at the Anglo-American School of Moscow in Russia. And that's where Felina and I crossed paths because we did a lot of trainings together when she was in Ukraine. Sorry, you can introduce yourself on the window. I also have, I'm married with two kids in elementary school. My wife is an elementary EAL teacher, and my son, he's in grade 1. My daughter is in grade 4, and on to Felina.
All right, so I'm Felina Hart. This is my second year in Budapest at the American International School. Before that, I was in Kiev, Ukraine for 5 years at Patriarch School International. And that's where I did a lot of the training. I actually went over to London and did a lot of training with solution focus, and through the CISA organization, CISA Counselors Organization, Joe and I actually start talking about that and getting a little bit more excited about using it and having somebody to share those ideas off of. I do have one son who is 27. I know everybody's it's hard for people to believe that, but he's 27, and he's actually living and working in Ohio right now. So we're really excited about being able to share this information. I would say by no means am I an expert, but at least I do have information that I can share in areas where I've used this. One thing I want you to take a minute to think about is all your time in education, your meetings with parents, kids, faculty, what's often discussed? What's often focused on? When you have a kid who's having difficulties in school, where is the focus normally? So just take a couple seconds to think about that. Think about your time in education and how those meetings actually occurred. So this is Steve DeShazer, and he actually was one of the therapists and co-founders of the Brief Solution Focused. And what he said was problem talk creates problems, solution talk creates solutions. So I know my time in education, especially in the States, anytime there was an issue with a kid, the meetings often revolved around what they weren't doing well, what the problems were. And there was a lot of talk about what the problems, why are these problems occurring? And we never seem to progress past that. And so when I start looking at a brief solution, this really spoke to me, the idea that if we're talking about the problems, then we're going to create more problems. We're not going to be able to move towards solutions because we're always focused on the problem and the why. And so we want to look more towards the solution and start talking about the solutions and how we can move forward. We did have a polling question for this slide. And the first one is, how familiar are you with solution focus? Very? Use some aspects of it, you read something about it, or you're clueless? If you could answer that poll. So it looks like most people have some ideas of solution focus. It looks like one person who doesn't know a lot about it. So we're hoping that the person who doesn't know a lot is going to gain a lot of information, and those who have used some aspects, maybe you're going to get, hopefully there's a little nugget or a useful piece of advice, something in this presentation that can be helpful to you. All right, so our agenda today is that we're hoping by the end of this presentations, you're going to understand why solution-focused therapies, rationales, and the benefits. So why do we use it? How is it beneficial, especially within the work that we do within schools and in international schools? What are the building blocks of a solution-focused conversation? And then also where can we use it in schools besides just our offices and the work that we do with kids, but how can we use it in other areas of schools as well? And we have a lot of resources included in this presentation also that you'll have access to. Solution-focused counseling.
So. Yes, okay. Now for me, I don't know if it was just the time of life I was in, but like I had a toddler, I had a newborn, I was in a rut at work, and I was also having a lot of more high profile cases where had a lot of kids who were self-injuring and suicidal ideation. It was just all this negativity that I was absorbing constantly. And I just thought, there had to be a better way. And plus I also had, I was also tired of seeing kids that had what I called seller's remorse. They'd come into my office and be like, bleh, and tell me all of their dirt. And then they would look the other way when they saw me in the hallway, like I was something like some leper or something. But then they would come back the next week and do the same thing all over again. And I was just like, this just seemed funky. It seemed like there's something else that was out there for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it was the same for me working in schools. Whenever there were meetings brought up, my first stint as a counselor was at an inner city school in Houston. And we had, 1,800 middle schoolers and 3 counselors. And we had rival gang members and a lot of, I did a lot of the crisis counseling there as well. But, the meetings always revolved around, well, what's wrong with this kid? What are the problems with this kid? And to me, that didn't make sense, right? Because I don't see kids as being inherently wrong or having a problem. I thought there was more to that, so where can we go with that? And then when I went international, I saw a lot of the same thing happening in meetings where we would have meetings about at-risk students. And it turned into where teachers were just griping and griping and griping about all the things that the kid wasn't doing. And finally I just said, well, what are they doing? Right? It can't be all bad all the time. So what are they doing? And so I start looking, I'm like, I said, there's got to be a better way. And that's when I looked into solution focus and I found the organization in London. And luckily I had a very supportive administration. And I said, look, we've got to do things differently. I want to get some more training on this, but we've got to do things differently. And they sent me for the training and saw a dramatic change in the way those meetings were run and how we're actually moving towards doing things that were helpful versus just griping about the student.
And some of the basics that have to be embraced. Solution focus puts the kid in the driver's seat, and it's hopeful. Adolescents already think they know more than us anyway. Why not actually treat them like they do? And solution focus does, and they gravitate towards it. And there's a misconception that solution focused practitioners totally ignore the problem. That's not at all true. We just don't roll around in it. Okay, we validate the concern, but then we focus on what the kid wants, the desired outcome, and rolling it all together just makes it a more optimistic, hopeful process.
Yeah, so it spends a lot of time focusing on the future, not the past. So we're not digging into the past, we're not digging into the why. Instead, we're looking at the future. So what are we doing well, and how are we going to do more of that in the future? Studies show that there's a greater likelihood of achievement and success with that. It also avoids defensiveness and blame reallocation. So it avoids the student trying to put the blame somewhere else. Instead, they really start looking at, well, what is it that they want and how are they going to get there? And I know me at that age, especially working in middle school, anytime somebody told me, well, what I needed to do is like, blah, 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 Charlie Brown's teacher, it's like, okay, yeah, sure. So we know that, they're dealing with so many other things, especially, as they're growing up and trying to figure out who they are. So why don't we just give them some of those tools to help them figure that out and use it in a good, positive way? And another thing is it opens multiple potential pathways. There's a lot of different ways that a meeting could go and a lot of different ideas that come up. And what you may think of as an adult that might be helpful for this kid, you'd be amazed when you're actually talking them through this, the ideas that they come up with. And you're like, oh yeah, I never would have thought of that. But you're actually listening to them and seeing what they know works for them. So why don't we just do more of that if you know that that's what works? So how does it work? The big question, right? Everybody wants to know how it works and what are the little tips. Well, here it comes.
There are 3 big takeaways that if you get anything from this, they just need to be embraced. One is, like it or not, folks, you're wonderful, and people talk to you because you're you. Okay, we tend to beat ourselves up and down. We are our own worst enemies, and that's you don't need to change anything if you don't want to. Okay, but if you're looking for something else, okay, there's an African West African proverb that I really like, that when the music changes, so does the dance. Okay, and one thing that you need to remember, though, if you're going to try doing solution focused strategies, is that just adding those strategies to your normal problem focused practice, it's just a mild remix. Okay, it's still the same song. And if you're going to do solution focused work, you need to embrace the fact that it's a different genre and it takes a different mindset. With that, we are distillers of hope. And if you want to evoke the inner superhero from the kid that you need to treat them like they are a superhero. Okay, you need to assume good intent, knowledge, and ability. Okay, if that kid was forced to go see you because the principal made them, they still walked in the door. They're there, and you have to treat them like they're choosing to be there, and they can do this. And another thing we're only facilitators. We are not experts. Okay, if you're going to be a solution focused counselor, you need to accept the fact that you don't have all the answers. If you're a person who thinks, oh, I've answered everything, well, thanks for coming, but you're not going to get much out of this presentation because this is a different approach. It's a different mindset. They are the experts of their lives right now. We just ask questions to help them create the vision they need to get mobilized.
And a lot of times what I do, especially if a kid's ordered or told that they have to come spend time with me, I always start off, I'm like, well, you're here. Why don't we just make the best of it, right? So, you have to be here. So what is it that you want to get out of that? I could tell you why they want you to be here, why you've been asked to come see me, but that's not going to be helpful for you. Instead, since you're here, what is it that you want? What is it that you want to be better, right? And that kind of takes that idea of them being forced to be there and me having an agenda off the table. Instead, the agenda now becomes theirs.
Totally. And this third part right here is piggybacks off of what Felina was just saying, that the whole focus is building the future they want. That's what we're doing. We're not rolling around in the problem. We only talk about the problem as much as they feel they need to talk about it. But then you even have to help them stop talking about it to move forward to the next step. Because with that, one thing that really sets the tone, as soon as they walk in the door, you start with, so what's your best hope for talking today? And it sets the tone that you're going to talk about something that they want. And it also makes them think about the end point rather than just spilling their guts and talking about the problem. Okay, so you immediately set the tone. And then every question has to, in the end, build that desired outcome, that preferred future. Because you're helping them envision it. You're helping them create the image. You're painting the picture. And, well, let me rephrase that. They're painting the picture. You're just asking them questions that help them put the strokes in the places they want.
So this was a graphic that I had found, and I think it speaks a lot, right? So when we're looking at problem talk, it's always about the problems, what's not working, what is the student's weakness, what they're doing that's not wanted, what they're doing wrong, what's the cause of the problem. Instead, if we flip it to the solution talk, we can still deal with the problem, but we're dealing with it in a more positive, reaffirming way, right? We were talking about solutions. So what is it that's working and how we can do more of that? Okay, so you're obviously not having this issue everywhere all the time. So when we're not having it, what are you doing? What are the things that are working? What are the strengths you have that allow you to get through that? What is it that you want? Okay, what's going well? And then that action towards that preferred future. So it's always talking about, okay, so these are the things that are going well. How are we going to do more of that in order to make the future even brighter and better? Okay, and how are we going to use the strengths to help get us there? The language is yes, but on problem talk, you cannot, why, if, the problem is. size. In solution talk, it's more yes and. Okay, yes, this is happening, and this is where you can go. You can do this because we have evidence of the fact that you have done it. So how are we going to do it more? When we get there, what is that going to look like? Imagining that future, because if we can, it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? What we think is what will be. So if we can imagine that positive future, if we can imagine these positive things happening, then we're more likely to react in a way that's going to make them happen. And then the attitude with problem talk, you're looking at blaming and prejudging and feelings of helplessness. The student starts to feel like, well, I can't do anything right. Why I'm, no matter what you do, no matter what I do, people are just going to see this problem, and they start to get into this hole of helplessness. With solution talk, instead, we're starting to look more at them being curious about things being better. Suspending all judgment, looking at how they can make a difference, how they can move forward in a positive light. So it just has a whole nother positive spin that's going on versus the negative, prejudging, constant talk of the problem.
And with that, even if a kid has good intent and he comes in, the one problem about problem talk is that they really start to focus on it and they feel defeated. So whereas I said we're distillers of hope, the good thing about solution focus, one of the many good things about it, is that they aren't constantly beating themselves down. They're with you because they were probably beaten down already. So why do more of it?
Yeah, and I mean, a good example of that was a student that I had in Ukraine. His younger brother was already at our school. He didn't come to us until 8th grade. And as soon as he got there, there was emails coming from teachers. He's not doing this, not doing that, da, da, da. It was just constant. And I said, okay, but what is he doing? You can't just not be doing nothing all the time. And they're like, well, we need to have a meeting with parents. We need to do this. And I said, okay, fine. We're going to have this meeting, but we're going to do it in a completely different way. I'm going to lead the meeting and I'm going to expect you to follow my agenda. And so we actually had a meeting where it was me, the principal, and all the teachers and the parents came in. And the parents were already having conversations with our LSS about having the younger child tested. Now these teachers are saying the older child needs to be tested. They're from old Ukrainian roots where the ideas of labels and testing, big no, they're very hesitant about it. And so I pulled everybody into this meeting, and mind you, all the emails made it sound like this kid couldn't do anything. Okay. So I start the meeting, and of course the kid's very upset, and he's like, I don't want to be in there. So I actually put him in another room with a teacher that he trusted. And I said, here's a Google Doc. We're going to be putting everything we talk about on this Google Doc, and I want you to see. He's like, well, all they're going to do is say bad things about me. That's all teachers have ever said about me are bad things. Nobody ever likes me. And so in the meeting, I actually told people, I said, okay, this is how we're going to start. We're going to go around the table. I want you to introduce yourself. I said, I want you to tell me 2 things he's doing well in your class. And what's the one main concern that you have? What's the one thing? If you had to choose one thing that could be better, what would it be? So we went around and did that. And you saw the parents who came in the meeting very like this, and all of a sudden you saw them relax because they started hearing good things about their child, right? And he came from a Ukrainian system where he was ranked and told he was stupid and beat down. And all of a sudden they're hearing good things about their child. And him in the other room, he's sitting there, and the teacher's telling me that you could see him all of a sudden relax because he's hearing positive things. And he's like, they really think this about me? They really see that I'm doing this. They really understand that I am trying. And so what it comes down to is the one thing he wasn't doing was turning his stuff in. He would work on it, but he just wouldn't turn it in, And so we went through this whole meeting, and it had a completely different outcome. The next day, the parents reached out to me via a personal tutor and said that they want to come see me. And I was like, oh, okay, what is this going to be about? You always get those emails, we need to see you. And the mom came in and she goes, you tell us what we need to do. They're like, we trust you. This is the first time we've heard great things about our child. Whatever you feel we need to do for him or in our other child, you let us know. So it completely changed the whole dynamics of the relationship with that parent. It changed the whole dynamics with that kid and how he felt about his teachers. And all of a sudden now he's at the point he's graduating and he's doing well. And it was a complete flip with that one twist of the conversation. What is it that he's doing well? So even just switching one little part of it and changing it to a positive can have a huge impact later. Sorry, didn't mean to go off on a rant.
And this all goes back, like the Godfather would be Erickson, and but his twist isn't really the foundation. It's just the first positive focus that he liked to build up positive traits and build strengths. And DeShazer and Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg, his wife, they started off in the 70s in California, and they started doing a lot of observation and video work, and which is highly underrated and people need to do more of, by the way. We have some resources that can help you do that later. But then when they went to Milwaukee, the nugget that they held on to was that the problem is not always there, like Felina was just saying. And they came up with something called the miracle question, which everybody who's ever read Solution Focus has read something about it. And it's just, a miracle happens overnight. You wake up the next day and the problem that is the roadblock is gone. And there's slightly different twists of it, but this was the foundational aspect, these two things that they spent their whole careers building off of.
And the people that we actually did our training with in brief, Evan George, Harvey Ratner, and Chris Iveson, they did a lot of work. They actually met with Steve DeShazer and his wife, and they came in and did work with them. But they focus a lot on the best hopes. They will not move forward in any session until they really narrow down what that best hopes is. And they call it the contract, right? It's the contract for the meeting. You can't move forward with anything if you don't have that original contract of what it is that the client wants. They look a lot at the tomorrow question, which is the miracle question, but they phrase it differently. And they spend a lot of time really building each segment. So they kind of go in this pattern, and they do their notes during the sessions, because then they can refer back to what the client said using their own words, and they have those notes for them. Elliot Connie is in the US, and he's done a lot of work with brief as well. He does a lot with the preferred future. Like, he really digs deep into that preferred future. I mean, he takes it minute by minute, step by step, in numerous, just the detail that he does is out there. And then he does have a handout with like 101 questions. So 101 questions, which is linked in here, to help you, right? Because one thing that I did most of my work with Evan, and he said, if the client's not able to answer the question, it's not the client's fault, it's the person's fault, it's the practitioner's fault, because you didn't ask the question correctly, right? You didn't ask the question in the right way for that client. So you may have to ask a question 2-3 times in a different way to make sure that it's where the client understands and the client's able to answer.
And with that, those questions are built around these 4 segments. Okay. And so the best hope, the contract, what Felina was just talking about, you always start with that. And then the end point, the feedback, generally it's you tell the person some positive things that you admire that they do. And for me, I also get them to tell me the big takeaways that they want to make sure they remember. In between those 2 points, you do resource talk and preferred future building. In a perfect world, your preferred future creating the preferred future will be over half your time with the person, okay? Because you're really getting them to envision it, okay? But with this, you also have to remember, we're school counselors. It's really hard to be a theoretical purist when you don't have consistent 45-minute sessions, okay? So with that, you can still use solution-focused principles even if you can't follow the preferred structure. So we're going to give you a whole bunch of examples basically for the rest of this presentation, on different ways it can be used with examples and note-taking structures and whatnot. and just try to find a couple nuggets you want to walk away with, specifically with the major principles and the wording.
And then this one was a session I actually did with Chris, and he had got this from one of his interactions that he had with somebody, where he looked at, we all go to museums, right? We all enjoy going out and going to museums. So he's like, let's pretend a solution-focused conversation is a museum. So what does that look like, right? The first part is the steps, the anticipation of actually getting into that museum. What are we going to see? What's going to be exciting about this? And the idea is that as a client's coming to a session, they're already anticipating what's going to happen. They're already thinking about things, right? And the studies have shown that there's actually some change that occurs within that pre-session. I think it's like 70% of people have some sort of pre-session change, because they're already doing the work in their head. They're already processing things. They're already thinking about things. So they're getting ready, that anticipation of getting into the museum. The ticket office is your ticket, your contract, right? You can't get into the museum if you don't have that ticket. So that would be your best hope. Okay. You can't get into the rest of the session if you don't have that ticket of that best hope, that contract of what it is that the client wants. The pictures of the future deal with that miracle question, or that tomorrow question. Okay. So if things would be different when they woke up and they had what they wanted, their hopes, who's going to notice? Okay, what are they going to notice? What are you going to notice in yourself? What is this person going to notice in you? And then actually walking them through their whole day. So, okay, you wake up in the morning. What do you normally do when you first wake up in the morning? Okay, well, I get out of bed and I, put my pants on. Okay, what do you feel when that's happening? How do you know that something's different this day? And so actually getting into all the little details. The pictures of the past is going to deal with all those exceptions and scales. And it's not like you do all the preferred future and then you do all these exceptions. Instead, you see the arrow kind of goes back and forth, because as you're talking about the preferred future, you're also bringing in those scales and those exceptions and those things. And so you're kind of going back and forth between those two rooms, trying to see and get all the information you can. And then the gift shop is dealing with so a place that you generally don't want to spend a lot of time, but museums always make it where, that's where you have to go through. And so you don't ask, what do you have to do to move up 1 point on scale? So if they put themselves at a 5, okay, you don't say, what do you have to do to move up 1 point? Instead, say something more of the lines of, if you moved up 1 point, what would that look like? Okay. Because they're going to be able to tell you what it is they have to do by just envisioning what it's going to look like. And then the exit is, you have to let the client leave the session feeling like they're appreciated for what they shared, feeling that sense of, okay, I really do have some valuable skills and strengths. And so sharing what strengths you saw in them, what were the valuable skills that you saw in them, and summing up that session using their own words. It's very important that you use their own words because it complements what it is, that sense of the idea that the client is in control, right? If you're using your words, now you've just shifted the control back to you. Instead, if you're using their words, then you're showing that they're still in charge of who they are and what happens after this. And you want them, as they leave, to think about looking for things that have improved, things that have gotten better. All right, so where can we use it in schools? We had another poll question up earlier, which everybody already answered, was, can it be used in other areas? And a lot of people said yes. And I'm glad that you guys said that, because there are a lot of areas that it can be used within schools. And when I started this, when I was in Ukraine, I started slowly sneaking it into any meeting I had, any group conversation I had. I would just slowly, like as people are talking, I would just slowly raise my hand and be like, well, what about this? And I would start adding these questions in, and people are looking at me like, what is she doing? But it started changing the dynamics of these meetings that we were having. And then I actually developed a whole counseling referral program based off of solution focus. So as they had to refer a student, they actually had to answer some solution focused questions on that referral. And Russell Sabella, who's in Florida, he actually has a whole pamphlet that you can actually download free off the internet of different forms and stuff that he's used. And I actually took some of those and tweaked them to fit the international school setting. And so that helped. Places I've used it are individual counseling, group counseling, parent meetings, especially mediation between parents, students, and coworkers. Last year, my first year here, came into a situation where there was 2 students who could not get along, but yet they couldn't stay away from each other. And it was constant. Every 2 days, somebody was in my office for something. And I found out that this has been a long history, even the year before I arrived and after that. And I said, I'm not going to spend the whole year dealing with this constant drama. Instead, we're going to do. So I start doing some solution focused conversation with them. But then I find out that the moms are very heavily involved in this issue as well, right? The kids are going home and moms are feeding a lot of this. And so actually pulled the moms into the conversation and did a whole solution focused thing with both moms, both kids, and my principal sitting there. And he's like, this, I don't know how this is going to work. These moms. And I said, just trust me. And so we did it. And we didn't have issues after that. They were finally just like, okay, because they figured out what they needed to do. It wasn't us all telling them what they needed to do. They figured it out, right? So scales, basically what I do a lot of scales. I love scales. Scales are my favorite things. With young kids, I actually break the sessions down into mini sessions. It takes longer to go through it, but it works for their little brains. So I may spend a whole, first 2 sessions just really talking about those hopes and getting that contract. And I really break it down for them. I also make it very interactive, especially with elementary school students and any low focus students. Anytime I can add an element of physical engagement in there, I've seen a lot more success with it. Parental involvement where needed. So those behavior mediations, like when I had these issues with the 2 girls and found out the parents were heavily involved, had to pull the parents in and do it as well. I also look a lot at instances and exceptions to try to help them find their strengths. Because a lot of times when they come to me, they don't feel like they have any strengths. So I focus a lot on that. And then I change the wording as needed. I don't ever use the word miracle, because my first couple times doing it, I said miracle and the kids are like, miracles don't happen. I'm like, okay. So they're like, magic isn't real. Miracles don't happen. I'm like, okay. So miracle doesn't happen, but something does happen that makes you feel different. So I always change it to something's just different. You just realize something's different. What is it? But I never use that word miracle, because it kind of bit me in the end a couple times with some little ones. So this is an interactive scale that I actually had in my office in Kiev. So I actually took the double-sided Velcro, sticky Velcro, and actually made a Velcro strip and put the numbers on there. And then I had these little people, somebody who represented the child, their teacher, their mom, their dad, and they loved it, because I'd be doing the scales with them. I'm like, where would you put yourself? And they're like climbing up and putting it on there. And then, okay, where would your mom put you? And then the other ones were what I had gotten from Denise. She's actually created little things where the kids could do a scale based off of their favorite foods, right? So 10 is their favorite food that they want all the time. 1 is, or 0 is the food that they would never want. And so they would actually create their own scales with that. And I actually made little laminated ones and had kids who I saw regularly who would have those. Or I had the blank squares where kids could actually create a scale off of games that they enjoyed, right? What's your ultimate favorite game that you want to play all the time? What's one that you would never want to play? And so they would actually create a scale. And so sometimes in their brain, that works a little bit better, because they can relate it to something that they already understand versus a number. Yeah, so with elementary Velcro scale, I've done it on the wall, on the floor, a lot of art drawing. The National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children has actually a solution-focused toolkit with lots of little color sheets and diagrams that you can download free off the internet as well. I've used the sensory path. So we had a sensory path at my old school, and I would actually have that conversation with them as we're jumping through the sensory paths. Okay, before we start the path, we got to figure out what it is that we want, because at the end is our hope. Our hope's at the end of that path. So before we start it, we figure out that hope. And then as we're going through the path, they have to give me some list or give me some information as we're going through, and they can't move forward until they can give me that information. but it adds that whole nother dynamic of that physical engagement. And role play. So instead of asking them what it would look like, well, show me what it looks like, right? Have them actually role play it out. And with kids, if you can connect that physical part to the actual words, I think it makes a bigger difference with them.
And for me, maybe it's because I'm a byproduct of working with Evan extensively at Brief, but I remember one of my first sessions with him, I was watching a video of him doing it, and I noticed him taking notes during the session. And I said, well, I wait, what? And he said, what do you mean? What? And he paused it. And I said, I was always told you don't take notes during session. And he said, well, when am I supposed to do it? And I said, well, I try to do it after. And he said, that doesn't sound like a very good use of my time. and I thought about it, and I started taking notes directly in session afterward. And I also noticed with adolescents specifically, they like talking and thinking, but they don't feel comfortable looking at you. So if they have something that they can look at while you're doing it, so I have a mini whiteboard in my office. I'll do it on my whiteboard. Most of the stuff I actually do on my iPad. And I have good notes for, I love it, by the way, that like on Zoom, I'll just share the screen. We'll be looking at the thing together. And then when we're done, I export it. Like in anything I ever do, we do on paper, iPad, or whiteboard, I'll take a picture of it, or I'll export that actual document when the kid leaves. And the best part is it also gives me my notes for the next session. I can just pick up, if I know that kid's coming in, I can look at it for 5 seconds, say, okay, that was right, that was right. Then the kid comes in and you can start your next session without trying to remember. I was always behind in my note taking. And then if you, well, let's leave it at that. I love sharing it. And it also is a great distraction for the kids. Plus, I noticed the more that they're looking at, they're actually processing it as they go, and they start noticing connections because I'm writing down their words. And then with the tomorrow question, I exclusively use the tomorrow question, and it's just a twist on the miracle question. So, and the reason why I use it, like Felina, I started playing with this in 2005, and I stopped because I was using the miracle question, and 3 times in 1 month, I had kids say, yeah, miracles don't happen. And, but the tomorrow question, it's the same thing. You just say, tomorrow you wake up and you're 1 step higher. How do you notice? What do you see? What are you doing? What's the first thought in your head? And so it's the same thing. It's just, you're taking out the word miracle. And the one twist that I do a little bit more than rigid practitioners of it is I do embed some skill building. Usually it's subtle through the questioning, but sometimes it is stopping and actually teaching a skill, which is not normally done for solution focused, because they believe that the people already have all the answers and you just have to help them paint the picture. But dealing with middle schoolers and young adolescents, especially if they have anything from anxiety to attending skill challenges, they sometimes need the skills, like if they need social thinking strategies, sometimes introducing some of those, but I'll show you in next slide how you can do that. Actually, it's the one after this one. This is my evolution right here. When I started the training, it's a 1-year process if you're doing it in person. Online, I imagine it's still a 1-year process, but when Felina and I both did it, oh, by the way, I drank her Kool-Aid. She was the one who introduced me to the guys at Brief, and I started it as she was finishing it. So
you just gotta blame me for everything.
This is only my 4th year doing it full time, but this is my 4th year doing it full time. I started off my first year. I had already read 2 of their books and a different solution focused book. So after my second training session with them, I started doing it full time. I'm like, okay, I'm learning by fire. And the problem was, following the traditional 4 segments, I couldn't get it done in under a half hour when I was first learning it. And I already had my first career as a high school social studies teacher, and I already had a master's in curriculum when I started to go do the counseling master's. And I found for me, it was easier to do it backwards design model. And so I worked with Evan and created a backwards design version of this that follows the middle strategy. And it's not as good in one aspect that you don't get the resource talk. And the resource talk is what they're good at, how they're good at it, and why they're good at it. And then you use that to build the preferred future. So in the middle version, I can always get it done in 15 to 25 minutes. And that was more friendly for me as a school counselor at that point. And it gave me an excuse. Like if you look at the school counseling 4 components that you're supposed to be doing, you know, of the counseling curriculum, the individual student support, the responsive services, and the indirect student support, I wasn't doing enough individual student support. I wasn't doing enough meetings. So I designed individual one-to-one meetings that only asked 3 questions. I have my sample in here in the examples later. But it gave me an excuse to do more of that. And so I started doing more individual meetings, and they would come in, and it was all resource talk. And it was so uplifting. When you ask them what they're good at or proud of, and they're like, what? Like, yeah, I mean, fishing, what? Because they always think they have to talk about school. I'm like, no, we don't have to talk about school. So then they relax and they start telling you what they're good at. And then you ask them how they got good at it. And what they do to what made them even better at it. And then you start getting all this resource talks. And so that way, when they do come in for responsive care, I was able to do this middle strategy. And I did that exclusively for 2 years. Now I do the far right. So although this isn't a recipe, you really do need, as you're starting to launch and using it exclusively, you need to pick a structure that you're going to follow and follow it diligently. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you on my example on the next page. You can see from my note-taking form, you can see I'll explain how you can use it for both.
And one thing to note is the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. It's a complete change in thought, right? It's human nature for us to focus a lot on problems. I mean, look at all of reality TV. It's all about the drama, right? And so it is a shift in thought and it's a shift in thinking, but the more you do it and you know, you're still going to find yourself slipping back into that problem talk. And then you have to kind of, okay, no, and bring yourself out of it and go back to and just trust in it and use it and practice it.
And frequently when I have my iPad already open and I know the kids coming in, we do it on this note form and it's in my iPad and I just write it everything all right on there. If I don't, I'll use my whiteboard or a piece of paper and that, but when I have the time, I know I'll do it on here. And the top 2 boxes are flip sides of the same coin, okay? And it's also rushing past these are is the most common mistake that a lot of people make, because you'll say like, what are your best hopes? They'll tell you something and you immediately jump to the next segment. Okay, well, what they tell you sometimes won't be possible. Like, what's your best hope? Well, I don't want my parents to get divorced. Okay, you can't control that. You can't pursuing that. It would be unjust. Okay, but then you could say, well, what difference would that make in your life? And they could say, well, I could spend more time with my dad. And say, okay, well, what would you be doing with him? And they would say, well, we used to go to the park and we do this and that, do that. So you can say, okay, so if we can figure out a way to help you spend more quality time with your dad, would this be a good use of our time? And well, yeah, okay. So then you have your contract, then you can move on. But if you just said, like, what's your best hope? I want to do better in school. Okay, which is a standard one for any of us, I'm sure. Even especially since most of the time that's not really what they want. You say, well, what difference would that make? Well, you know, I'd get more freedom. I'd be able to go hang out with my friends. I'd be able to, my parents would be off my back. And then you can say, okay, well, if we could help you get along better with your parents, would this be a good use of our time? Well, yeah. Okay, so and then it's really not about doing better in school at all, but you're still pursuing and building doing better with their parents and doing better in school, because that's what they're conflicting over. So it's just a different way to build it. Now, if you're going to do it the traditional structure, after you do that, you go over here to the far left. Okay, and this, for the resource talk, this is usually like something they're good at. It's and having nothing to do with school at all and nothing to do with the problem. Okay, and then they tell you it and you ask how. What did you do to get good at it? And you build that, you build the whole vision. I did this the other day with a kid. I have it in the examples. He's failing. He's in danger of getting kicked out of the school. But this whole thing was on go-kart driving, go-kart racing, and video game racer games. So he told me all the different stuff that he does to get good at that. And then we're like, oh, okay. So then we jump over. And then these two, if you're following the traditional model, these are kind of ping-ponging back and forth. Okay. But most of my notes, I'll go to this far area here when I'm doing the traditional model. And I'll be jotting down stuff here and then say, okay, well, tomorrow when this is happening, what's the first thing you're going to notice? And then, so if you do the traditional model, it isn't segmented as much. These are kind of swirled together. And then you go to the endpoint, the confirming, having them tell you the things they want to remember. If you do the backwards design model, after you do the difference and the best hope, you say, okay, you're at a 10, it's working. How do I know? What do I see? What do you do? And then you have them explain it and build it. And then you say, okay, where are you now? And they say, well, a 3. Okay, usually 3 or 4 are the most common scaling initial numbers that are given, by the way. I don't know why, but they are. But then you say, okay, well, wow, with all the stuff going on, how have you done it? What's working? And then you focus on the things that are within the crappiness of their situation. What is working? And they tell you things are going well. And then you go to the middle. Okay, tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're one step higher. What are you going to see? How are you going to know? What are you going to eat for breakfast? It could be, and like literally have them paint where they're going. So if you do the backwards design model, it is a little bit faster. And it's also, people who have a teaching background might actually find it more comfortable as a transitionary strategy. But anyway about it, the whole point is you need the resource talk in some way to help build the preferred future. Okay, now, well, let me stop sharing. Okay, there. I'll go back to sharing my screen in a second, but just to show you the examples. If you go to the examples on that slide, which is shared with all of you, you'll have it. You can see the templates here. In the templates, I have this is just the template I use for my one-to-one conversations with kids. And it's literally, what are you good at or proud of? And I tell them in advance, it doesn't have to be about school. So they already know that. And I usually use the example. I mean, it could be fishing. And they're like, oh, really? Okay. And then this next question, for 85, 90% of the kids, it just turns into a chat. Like, but I specifically ask this to introduce the phrase best hopes. So I get them familiar with it. So that way when they do come back and I do ask what their best hopes are, they've already kind of kicked it around. And it's like, how is this going to be useful? How can I make the most of this time? All that kind of stuff. And this might actually turn into a planning for something. It might not be. But then this is the last one is also part resource talk, but it also helps me gauge their social situation throughout the year, especially for kids that have a hard time clicking with different kids. And it just lets me know who are the people they want to nurture relationships with and why, what they're doing that's working and what they want to do more of and when. And this generally here takes somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. And first quarter, I try to get all new kids and grade 6s because I'm a middle school counselor. And then second quarter, I try to get all of the other kids who aren't new and follow up with other kids. And it really normalizes seeing the counselor. The best thing about increasing your individual student planning is you can even walk straight up to somebody and say, hey man, it's your turn. And they'll go, oh, and they'll make a joke about it. But then they know that it's normalized. It's everyone seeing the counselor. It's not a big deal. And it really has done a lot of good for me in my career to start doing more of these. And then for, like I mentioned, my little whiteboard. Okay, with GoodNotes 4 and my iPad, you can combine note-taking, embed pictures, do everything. So this is just one quick example. You don't necessarily need to write down everything they say, but this is through the backwards design model, obviously. But it just helps clarify. And another one that Sample sessions. I'm gonna pick a different one than Felina suggested. But oh, I do have one though. For this young man, this kid is an EAL speaker. So this is an example of where I did do some skill building. Okay, he said he wanted to feel connected and safe, but he had a hard time. And this is labeled as semi-traditional because here I did focus on what's working now and not what he's good at. But we were talking about what he's good at now. And then when we were kicking back and forth between these two, he really wanted to talk to these kids, and he didn't have the English. He didn't know what he was going to say. So I introduced just this one strategy. You know, it bugs me when, and then immediately go into you state when, and then but you immediately go into asking for like help. So they realize, oh, you're not complaining. You want help. Okay. So but me giving him the strategy is just an example of doing some skill building within the session. As a middle school counselor or high school counselor, actually any counselor might have to do at some point. And another one here is also, oh, by the way, these backwards, the BD is backwards design, and then with skill building, and then like traditional. Okay, so you can see how I've labeled it, and I have different examples of different things in here, but there are many ways to win, and you don't have to follow only one structure. But if you ask the kinds of questions that are building the future, it's how will you notice? What will be happening? What will you see? Okay, what will be, and if they start, we'll get into like redirecting complaints in a second. But so, and if you like this, in the examples, there is this template that you could download and use if you have an iPad, or if you just want paper copies. And I also have, like Felina mentioned, for student concerns. At my school last year, we did a whole reboot, and I led the staff through a student concerns revision. And I made a demo copy of something you could use if you wanted. It's on a Google site, but if you go into this one, staff student concerns revision, this was done. I explained the whole thing. I don't expect you to read it. I'm just pointing out, if you're a person who's stuck doing student concerns as part of your job in school counseling, just come back and take a peek at this, because it walks you through what we did. And I also give you some, on the second page, I give you a link to a demo copy that you could steal and use. The thing that's most important when you're working with staff is basically, one, avoiding problem talk, because the problem talk is generally about them. It's about validating the teacher. It's not about fixing the problem. And the hard part with that, oh, there, it's back. Okay. When you have to build it with them. You can't go in with an endpoint that you already know. And you guys know this, you're counselors, okay? But your administrators might need some support with that. So if you go into a school with a rich tradition, if solution focus works perfectly, because there's no preconceived notion, and you get everyone to establish what they're doing and design what they want it to be, and then you build it together. And I just have our notes that we followed. But going over this with your administrator in advance would be really beneficial, because frequently they need to get on board before you can actually do it. Here's a video. It's 7 minutes. It's a compilation from Elliot Connie. I mentioned Elliot. We've mentioned Elliot multiple times. If you sign up, we have in their resources his site. If you sign up for any of his webinar series, you get on his mailing list, which is kind of annoying because he sends out stuff all the time, but it's wonderful because he's the only person I found that you can get video packages where you can watch sessions with commentary. Okay. And seeing somebody else do it is very, very powerful. And it's a great way to learn. Steve DeShazer said everything he got from Solution Focus, he got by watching his wife, and literally watching her, because they would videotape all their sessions, they would go over them together, and they would discuss them. So Elliot Connie, if you want to do some sessions, he even has one with adolescents. the one that I signed up for. Most of them are $197 packages after you sit through the webinar. But it's money well spent, especially if you can get your school to pay for it. And this one is a guy named Logan. He was in both the adolescent one and the young adult one. He's probably about 21. But we just want you to pay attention to the types of question Elliot asks. And when Elliot swears, you just need to know that he's using the client's exact words. Elliot's not trying to be cool and just dropping swear words, okay? He's making sure he uses the exact words used by the client.
But in solution-focused brief therapy, we treat every single client as if they're motivated. Even though Logan did not choose to come to therapy on his own fruition, he still took the step to walk into my office. And as a consequence of that, I'm going to treat him like he's motivated. That's one of the things that makes solution-focused brief therapy so different, is we don't acknowledge things like resistance. We don't acknowledge opposition. Logan is in my office, so consequently, I'm going to treat him as if he made a choice. I'm going to treat him as if he's motivated to experience change. And also, I'm not going to argue with Logan about the points of marijuana, or is drug use bad, or is Logan bad. I have to work with him to identify what his preferred future looks like, and engage him in a description of that preferred future. That's my job when I'm doing solution-focused brief therapy. So here's the session. The first person that you might catch yourself giving a shit about, caring about. Who's the first person that might run through your mind? Probably my mom. And what would be different about the way you thought about your mom that would let you know that this is Logan giving a shit and caring about your mom? I mean, most of the time, I think, how am I going to keep her from knowing or worrying? And I think instead I'd be more concerned with how is her day going to go? Like, is there something I should know about that's planned today? Familial stuff. I've never been big on family, so I imagine I'd think along those lines. Like, yeah, right. Like maybe I'd be happy at the idea of getting to interact with her. Okay. And how different would that be? Would that be like a big difference or a little difference to catch yourself being happy with the idea of interacting with your mom? Probably big difference. Yeah. And as you're laying in bed between the hours of 10 and 11, who else would you find yourself giving a shit about? Who else would you find yourself caring about? People who've tried giving a shit about me and then I've shut out. And who might be someone like that? There's one of my friends, her name's Ashton. She's we were pretty close. Right. Like, I guess fairly close. Right. And even before you went to go see Dad, after you got out of the shower, what would be different about the way the magnificent master got dressed? He might think about the clothes he's picking out. What's he likely to pick out on a day where it feels like the magnificent master? Something better than this. A nicer jacket, nicer shirt. Probably fixes his hair up, something. Right. Yeah. And when your dad saw this nicer jacket, this nicer shirt, the hair fixed up, before you even said a word, what would your dad's first clue be that he's looking at a different version of his son? And then what would you do next? Now that you're in the living room, you've had this moment with Dad, what's the next thing on? Probably go into the kitchen, get a bite. What are you likely to eat on a day where you feel like you're very best? Very best. What would I eat? Yeah, what are you likely to eat on a day you feel like you're very best? Well, I'd probably make an effort to
cook a pizza instead of just taking the leftovers out of the fridge.
Okay.
Something like that.
You'd be more likely to cook pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Why pizza? Curious.
Pizza's good.
Food you enjoy.
Yeah.
And do you cook it like you're from scratch cooking, or like you mean like I would?
No, I'd get like one of those box things from the fridge, and I'd stick it in for like 30 minutes.
Okay.
That takes too long, so I usually there's leftovers something,
Right.
and so I eat that.
Okay. But on this day, you'd like make it for 30 minutes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I prepare it.
Okay.
I guess.
Okay. And what would you do while you're waiting for the pizza to get ready?
I don't know. I'd wait. Maybe I'd go watch TV. My dad set it in my room. Maybe I'd do something responsible. I don't know.
What's your dad likely to be watching? The first thing the only thing I want to ask you to do is, I just want you to notice how often you are your very best, and how people around you respond to you when you're your very best. I want you to like kind of intentionally give off the best of Logan, and I just want you to see how people respond when you're being the best Logan you can be. That sound doable?
I mean, I can try.
Perfect. That's all I can ask. And then I'd love to follow up with you, and then we'll see how it goes. That sound okay?
Sure.
Excellent. Well, come with me, and we'll. So that was the story of Logan. Now, as you can see, it's very, very difficult to engage teenagers and young adults in these conversations. And he came into therapy with his own ideas and his own thoughts, his own feelings. And I wasn't going to argue or confront them. I'm just going to ask him the questions. You could see it changed, right? As we went through the session, you could see Logan's affect change, his ability to describe and accept the need for change happened just like that as we were having a conversation. What makes solution-focused brief therapy so difficult is you have to remain disciplined, even in the face of clients who seemingly don't want to answer your questions. My job is to pose questions to him that Logan wants to respond to, would benefit from responding to, and once we do that, change actually begins to happen. And you can see how we walk through the 4 stages of solution-focused brief therapy. What are your best hopes? Engage in resource talk, preferred future description, and session closing. That's the most important thing in solution-focused brief therapy. Thank you for checking out the story of Logan.
So, Felina, seeing that we're already over the first hour and we want to have some Q&A at the end, you can let me know what you want to skip for the next portions.
I think we can get through it fairly quickly if we just move it along. So, I mean, like you said, you know, you may have a client that's resistant. And what Evan always told me is, even if they're not necessarily answering the questions, if you're asking the questions, they're still thinking it. They're still processing it in their head. So just putting those questions out there in the air, and you may have a couple sessions that are silent, but eventually they're processing it and they're thinking of it. The big thing is always trying to avoid or redirect problem talk. You know, kids, it's human nature to talk about the problem. So if a student starts talking about the problem, you do want to validate and say, wow, you know, that sounds really horrible. You know, what you have going on, that must be really rough for you. But then you want to start asking questions that offers them an alternative so that they don't delve into that problem. So is this something that you want to be different in your life, right? Then you're getting to that hope. What would be happening instead? So if it was different, what would be happening instead? Or so how do you know that you've gotten on top of that, sorted that out, made progress in relation to that? And so you're changing that problem talk and you're starting to engage it more into solution talk.
And this is just to follow up on the exact same stuff that Felina was saying. There are just many ways to redirect. Mm-hmm. When they talk about problems, you can let them talk about the problem, but focus on the strengths when they're talking about the problem. How'd they get through it? How'd they keep going? And get them to notice the strengths that they demonstrated even when they're talking about the problem. Okay, but then you do have to leap forward out of the problem talk. But if you're gonna, they have to be able to, you have to bring them to the water and then let them drink. And you can't just force them to where you want them to be you have to just encourage them along. And so if they have to roll around in the problem, at least do it positively.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the big thing is, no matter of what format you use or how the order that you put things in, you still want to focus on. Can you click it? You still want to focus on just using their words. Okay, what are things that you heard in the meeting? What's going to be different? The signs that they're going to see? What's going to be happening instead? And just keep kind of helping them envision that best hope. Some really good books that I've gotten recently. You want to click it, Jordan?
No, I'm actually going to make a follow up on what you were just saying. If you have one cheat sheet that you're going to have the whole time that you're trying to start using this, if you haven't been playing around with this a lot, it's this slide right here. Okay. Just, it's easy to fall back into problem talk and roll around it, because that's what we were all trained to do. Okay. And Evan and the team in brief, they were even saying sometimes it's easier to teach non-mental health professionals this strategy than anyone who's been trained in mental health, because they have less to unlearn. Okay. So if you really want to have a cheat sheet, make it this one.
And I've also typed up a cheat sheet for my training with brief that I'm actually going to upload to Whova as well. So you'll have that to kind of go off of it. It has a little bit more detailed questions and stuff within there. One book that came out recently is this one. And so it's all about different strategies and ideas for using solution focus within the classroom, which I've started pulling different things out to help make it more school-wide in my school.
And I will plug, oh, no, it's not next. Okay.
Within the classroom, there's a lot of different ways to use it, and in the effort of time, we won't get into that, but we will be uploading a bunch of resources, and we've actually created a Google Drive with a lot of our resources as well. So we'll be uploading a lot of those. There's also a solution-focused schools organization, which is good. Making sure that you're always building depth. Instead of well done, you can use solution focus to build depth with your conversations with students.
And this one, the reason why I'm playing this is because Felina actually wrote one of the chapters, and I didn't want to have her have to feel
not bragging. It's a great book.
So
if you're my chapter out.
in the 4 books that we recommend later on the resource slide, 2 of the 4 are the 2 that we just showed you.
Yeah.
Okay. And and here it is. So for Brief and Elliot Connie, they both have their own websites. They're linked here. They both do their own trainings. They're linked here, and they have numerous resources. We both went through Brief. I could sing their praises up and down all day long. Elliot, I've watched a lot of his stuff, and he is good friends with all the guys at Brief. They go work together every summer. And he has a bunch of video resources that I think anyone who does this anywhere on the planet, regardless of how long you've been doing it, it's great professional development if you get on any of his video series.
And Brief, I was going to say, like, I still reach out to them every now and then. And on Facebook, they post blogs with like, oh, well, we've been thinking about this lately. So just having those, they're constantly putting, but even now, like I'll reach out to Evan and his wife and be like, okay, so I have a question about this. And they're willing to help, irregardless. So.
Of these books on the bottom, the first one, Denise, Evan's wife, wrote with Harvey. And even though it has coaching in the title, they tell you about halfway through the book that's really the same stuff. But I thought it was a very user-friendly introductory, and I like how they package the steps. Mm-hmm. So like the other books, they're really made for people who have more of an understanding already. And I thought the Brief coaching with children was the top one was a great starting point if you're only going to have time to read one.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the Solution Focused Schools website. This was started by Linda Metcalf out of Texas. She's written several books like using solution focus with RTI, in parenting and teaching, those sorts of things. And so she started this organization, and there's actually schools in Texas in different areas that have trained everybody in solution focus, including teachers. And so they talk a lot. They just did a conference, a weekend conference, but you can actually join the organization, and every Wednesday they have PD on solution focus with different experts that you can get. They post videos, they post resources, they post presentations. So it's a great website to just start getting a lot of information and sitting through and seeing. So.
And I'm going to put the link from this version that we're looking at right here is on the web, where it'll be on the Whova site as well. But if you want to just click that link and bookmark it, if you want access to all these other bookmarks that we've mentioned, they're open. So you can just go and grab them at any point.
And
so,
George and I have created a Google folder with a lot of our resources and stuff. I'll go through and make sure to add those too, and then we'll just figure out how to get that to everybody, because I don't know. I know we're only allowed to upload with like 2 documents or 3 documents. So I don't know how to actually upload that Google folder. So I'll get with Brooke and figure that out.
And the Solution Focused Schools website that we were just talking about is a link. It's right here in the middle. So basically everything we've referenced is linked in this PDF. I mean, in this this presentation. So you can go back and check it at your leisure. Do you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to kick around? And I haven't had a chance to actually look at this.
And I'm open to emails too. So if you think of something later and you're like, oh, I really wish I would have asked this, you're welcome to email me at any time. So
same with me, and our emails are linked on the very first slide. So if you just go to our names and click our names, it goes to our emails. So you can get a hold of either or both of us.
Felina and Joe, much earlier in the chat, there was a question that was asking how to phrase the hopes question or the miracle question for an elementary student so that it was easier for them to understand, or something along those lines. I need to go all the way back up, but I know that that person could even unmute and maybe ask that question now, but I know that was something that hasn't been addressed yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Becky has it here. And Becky, do you want to speak, or do you want me to just read it?
So
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm here. But I was just wondering, because, what is your best hope for this session, just working with elementary age students? Just wondering how you would ask that to bring it a little bit more down to their level.
So when I worked with elementary back in Kiev, it's matters finding what works for the kids. So a lot of time it'd be like, what is it that you want to be better? What's not going well that could be better? How do you want to be happier? So just trying to find the words that work for them, but just trying to get them to think about what it is that they want more of, right? So what do you want more of? What do you want? What would make you more happy? Those sorts of things helps them to kind of come up with that contract. And you may have to ask it 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to get to it. But it's a matter of finding what works for that individual child.
Okay, thank you.
And Melissa asked, how would you compare solution-focused techniques with motivational interviewing? When I first encountered motivational interviewing, I was already doing solution focus, and it had a huge overlap to me, and I frankly didn't pay enough attention to it to really respond, because I did see an overlap, and I thought I was already, and I was very happy. I had only been doing solution focus for about a year at that point, so I didn't roll around enough in it. Felina, do you have any expertise?
I don't know much about motivational. I mean, I've kind of found solution focus, and that's what I stuck with. To me, it just fit more with what I was wanting, that more positive aspect. I even like it better than CBT and those sorts of things, which a lot of times in schools, you'll get the CBT route that people want you to take. But yeah, solution focus is just kind of what I fell in love with, and I started seeing so many areas that it could be used, and completely changed my working relationships, not just with students, but also with parents and with administration, and I think it comes across very harmless, especially if you have resistant parents who are like, oh no, the counselor, right? They're going to want to do this to my child and label this child. It really kind of takes a lot of that out of it. And you refer to them as being the expert on their child, or the child being the expert on themselves. And it really helps to, I think, break down walls.
Yeah. And I'm always doing PD. But all my PD for the past several years has really been focused on trying to better myself as a practitioner of solution focus, and trying to, like, now I'm incredibly confident in my ability to use it in counseling sessions, and I'm trying to focus on bringing it to more aspects of the school, like Felina's talking about. And I would recommend, if you're going to start with one point, start with the point that is most controllable, which is what you think and what you do. So I would work on it in your counseling. And then if you want to bring it to school afterward. It sounds like Felina kind of did it in reverse order from my comfort zone. But like I've only been focusing the past year on trying to really get it to be utilized in all aspects of my interactions around staff. And
I was going to say, and a lot of times staff and stuff will be resistant. So I just do it sneakily. I just slowly sneak it into different things. Like we just had an incident with a kid where we had our SST and the teachers are talking about this kid. I'm like, well, have you had a conversation with him? Well, we try to talk to him, but we don't. And so the kid, I've talked to the parents, I talked to the kid and I said, all right, I said, I've got a job for you. He's like, what? And I said, I want you to go and talk to each of your teachers. He's like, oh. And I said, but ask them just 3 questions and then put it down. So what am I doing well? What's one thing I can work on? And what difference would that make? Like, you know, what's something we can do together? What's a plan we can come up together for this class to make sure that we can, you know, improve this and get me doing what I do well more often. And so I sent it out. I sat with him and I sent it out to the teachers. And of course, my LSS teacher, she knows that I'm really solution focused. I sent it to her too. And she messaged back. She's like, I see what you're doing. I'm just like, but it made such a huge difference because the kid actually, he took charge of that conversation. He knew what kind of worked for him, what didn't. And so since he was kind of in charge of that conversation with the teachers, it had a completely different impact versus the teachers just telling him what they want him to do. It completely changed. And so he's like, okay, so now I really see that this is what, even though people had been telling him for the past year, the fact that he took charge of that conversation and he figured it out on his own and had that conversation with the teachers completely changed the outcome. And he's starting to do much better. So.
Yeah, the sneak attack tends to work best. And it's I'd say challenging people directly generally leads to fights, and that's the exact thing we do not need as counselors. So when I bring this to staff, I try to do it as what are the best hopes for the situation, and what does it look like when it's working? And so kind of like the backwards design model that I was talking about. But then whatever we create might not be solution focused in nature, but if they're creating it and they have buy-in. So sometimes you have to pick your poison. I look at it as getting buy-in for a slightly flawed outcome is much, much, much better than having something that's perfect fail. So building it with the staff, helping them come up with their preferred future when they all have buy-in and they build it together. I've had success with it with advisory programs, with student concerns programs. I'm trying to do more of it and just get better at it. And
any other questions, comments, anything? I know it's a lot of information thrown at you, but hopefully once you have the resources, you can go back and dig at it and just know that there's tons of stuff out there. You know, like I said, big names are, you know, Brief and Elliot Connie and Linda Metcalf and Russell Sabella. Those are great resources across the board. They have lots of stuff out there on the net that's for free. So.
Yeah. And Elliot's stuff, even though you have to pay for it, for his, like he'll do a lot of training sessions that are free. And then he'll have a package that you could buy at the end if you want. It's kind of like the hook. And I would say they're worth it. It's money well spent, especially if you have staff PD that you can use. Like really, you can read all the books you want, but seeing it happen after you've read some of those books really is powerful and meaningful. It's more of a fast forward button for me. And it really helped solidify some of my understandings. Unfortunately, when I was doing the brief thing, they actually let me watch videos for a day and then debrief with them afterward as one of my 10 days because it doesn't matter why, but it was a hybrid agreement they made with me. And it was one of the most powerful things because it was my last day. And it really helped piece a lot of things together than the conversations I had afterward. So I really recommend buying one of those packages.
Before I see Joe and Felina that people are saying thank you in the chat, and just before we start losing people because the session, kind of officially is going to be coming to a close, I just want to thank you guys so much and also remind people, please do the feedback, like give the rating and give them some concrete feedback on the Whova the Whova app. It's great to put comments and thank yous in the chat, but that's not as full of responses. I know our presenters who put so much time and energy into this. And I just want to say it's been really enriching. And, I actually wasn't aware of brief and solution focused therapy training as much as I was about like resources like the books. And so to know that there's actual PD around this and to learn about that and that it's affordable and that we can, and for many of us, it's even close. Because it's in London and in the US and we can do it, at different times and hopefully with the funding of our schools. That was exceptionally encouraging to me. So I just want to say thank you guys and obviously your resources too. So thank you for putting your emails in here and for being willing to be a resource to us that we can reach out and for sharing templates and videos and all these examples. I just think that's really, really helpful for all of us. So thank you so much. You both were energy and information and just really generous. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. Yay, Joe and Felina.
Big thing is just take it and make it your own.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.